Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. They appear in countless stories throughout time and all across the world. They may be mighty allies, or colossal enemies, creators or destroyers, forces of order or chaos, cunning or dim. But no matter their role or their nature, they were always larger than life. Giants. With a name derived from the earthborn gigantes of Greek mythology, giants are one of, if not the most widespread beings of folklore, universally tremendous in stature and blessed with prodigious strength and occasionally other magical powers. Every culture on the planet tells stories of giants, from the Nephilim of Hebrew lore, to Gog-Magog of Arthurian legend, to the Cyclopses of Greek mythology. Whereas most other monsters of legend, such as dragons, look like animals or otherworldly creatures, giants, on the other hand, usually resemble people, albeit with far larger proportions. No two giants were ever exactly alike. They could vary dramatically in size, with some that could almost pass for abnormally large humans, and some so huge that they can touch the stars with a reach of their hand. Some are given horrid traits such as horns, a single eye, multiple arms, multiple heads, etc., yet still maintain a humanoid appearance, one that at times may be too similar for comfort. Moreover, giants could be benevolent towards others, or ruthless and savage, or even be capable of both depending on their mood. To the various peoples of the ancient world, giants were not only imposing in size and power, but unpredictable in nature, worthy of awe and fear. Giants were often believed to be responsible for shaping the world as we know it. In Norse mythology, the primordial world was a shapeless wasteland of snow, ice, and darkness, and there lived only the frost giant Ymir and his cow Audumla. In time, the Aesir gods emerged from the snow, and fought and slew Ymir and most of his offspring. And from his corpse and his fluids, they created Midgard, the earth with all of its seas, mountains, trees, plants, and clouds. And from his skull, they crafted their home, Asgard, and went on to shape the very cosmos. In Chinese mythology, a being named Panku, born from a cosmic egg at the beginning of creation, spent millennia holding back the opposing forces of yin and yang, one above his head and the other below his feet, yin becoming the heavens and yang becoming the earth. As the centuries passed, Panku grew in size every day, as did yin and yang, until heaven and earth were so far apart that they could no longer fight with one another, and Panku was a massive giant. Panku died shortly after, and like Ymir, his body became the mountains of the earth, his breath the winds, his eyes the sun and the moon, and his sweat and blood the waters. In Bushongo mythology of Central Africa, the creator god, Bamba, was depicted as a primordial giant who created the world and its creatures by vomiting up the contents of his stomach into the vast sea of chaos. In Greek mythology, from entities Gaia and Uranus, the earth and the sky, came the Titans, primordial beings who were often depicted in art as being colossal in size, and who ruled the world until their offspring, the Olympian gods and their allies, led by Zeus, overthrew them in an epic battle that shaped the world anew. Many of the Titans were condemned to the pits of Tartarus, but one among them, Atlas, was sentenced to stand at the western edge of the world and bear the weight of the heavens upon his shoulders for all eternity. Many natural wonders of the world were attributed to the actions of giants. From their footprints, craters and lakes would form. Where they had plowed or dropped their axe, a canyon would be created. Their battles would tear apart plains and leave rocky mountains in their wake. Massive boulders in Scandinavia and Germany that seemed to have no earthly business being there were said to be the result of giants hurling them either for sport or for combat. The plain of jars in Laos is dotted with megalithic jar-like boulders, some measuring up to 10 feet tall, that according to folklore belonged to an ancient race of giants that brewed vast amounts of wine. Volcanic activity from Mount Etna in Sicily was explained to be the work of Typhon, a monstrous giant that battled Zeus in the beginning of time, only to be buried under the mountain. In Arthurian legend, the rock formation known as Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England, was the result of the combined efforts of the wizard Merlin and a giant. The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland was said to be created by Finn McCool, a hero who was sometimes said to be gigantic in stature, in order for him to cross the North Channel and battle a Scottish giant named Benandonner. Just as humans impact their environment more so than any other animal, so too giants would reshape the world simply by living their lives. More often than not, giants of legend were cruel in nature, committing acts of theft, destruction, brutality, murder, and even cannibalism. Nomadic peoples of South Africa tell of the Agamusa, a race of giants with eyes on the soles of their feet rather than within their heads, who hunt human beings, utilizing their incredible physical prowess and magically attuned senses of smell and hearing. Japanese mythology had the Oni, the ogreish and brutal servants of great Lord Enma, who gleefully mete out horrendous torture, such as peeling off skin, crushing bones, and other torments too horrible to describe. Irish mythology had the Fomorians, cruel beings who came from beneath the sea, ruled by the wicked one-eyed King Balor, and the sworn enemies of the Tuatha De Danann. Paiute mythology tells of a race of white-skinned, red-haired giants called the Siteka, whose cannibalistic ways led to a great war between man and giant. Scandinavian folklore had trolls, vicious and unintelligent beasts who would raid farms and villages, kidnap children, and eat people. In Greek mythology, the Olympians faced the Gigantes, evil snake-legged giants born of Gaia, engaging them in a vicious battle, one that they were victorious in with the aid of Hercules, or Heracles as he was originally known. In Norse mythology, the Jotnar, the giants descended from Ymir, were depicted as being perpetually at odds with the Aesir and the Vanir, namely the god of thunder, Thor. The trickster Loki was half Jotun, and caused endless mischief and grief, and even triggered the events of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods that would one day culminate in a climactic battle between the gods and giants that will leave the world in ashes. And with the malice of evil and man-eating giants, and the threats that they pose to mankind and civilization, came the heroic element of giant slayers. As one would imagine, the immense size and strength, and potentially other magical powers of giants, would have made them nigh impossible to defeat in direct combat. As a result, any who would dare challenge the might of a giant, be they mortal or god, would have to utilize cunning, tricks, and perhaps a little magic of their own. The Mesopotamian demigod Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu utilized teamwork and combined strength to defeat the monster Humbaba. In the Norse sagas, Thor would face giants in combat with the aid of his mystical hammer Mjolnir, bringing mountain-sized enemies to their knees. The Greco-Roman hero Hercules fought and slew numerous giants in addition to the Gigantes, including the triple-bodied Geryon with magically envenomed arrows, and the earth giant Antaeus by holding him off the ground and crushing him savagely. In the Odyssey, Odysseus and his men were trapped by a giant man-eating cyclops named Polyphemus. Instead of fighting him, Odysseus introduced himself as Nobody, and tricked the Cyclops into getting drunk. While Polyphemus slept, Odysseus blinded him, leading the giant to cry out to his brothers that nobody had blinded him, and so no help would come to the Cyclops. Odysseus and his men then escaped Polyphemus by clinging to the underbellies of the Cyclops' sheep. In Japanese legend, the Peach Boy Momotaro and his animal companions defeated a clan of Oni by outsmarting them and overwhelming them with clever battle tactics. Quinnipiac mythology told of a stone giant named Hobbamock, who felt betrayed by the living creatures of the world, and in his heartbreak and rage he tore the forest apart, decimating food supplies and killing any who strayed in his path, until the great spirit Ketan cast a sleeping spell upon the oysters that Hobbamock ate in vast amounts. When Hobbamock finished eating, the spell took hold, and he lay down to sleep, and remains so to this very day. In the Grimm's fairy tale The Brave Little Tailor, the eponymous tailor got the better of a rather stupid giant, several times in fact, leading to other giants fearing the tailor, and later tricking two other giants into fighting each other to the death. In 1 Samuel in the Old Testament, the Philistine champion was a savage and cruel giant named Goliath, said variously to be 4 cubits in a span, or 6 cubits in a span in height, who issued a challenge to the Israelite army, daring them to send forth a single warrior to face him in single combat. The only one brave enough to step forth was a young shepherd boy named David, a meek and small youth whose presence only angered Goliath. With no sword or shield, David killed Goliath with his trusty slingshot, landing a stone through the giant's skull. Perhaps the most famous giant slayer was a boy named Jack from Cornish mythology. In this tale, a particularly cruel giant named Cormoran would travel from St. Michael's Mount to the mainland every day to feast upon unfortunate souls and anything else he would happen upon. A farm boy named Jack devised a plan to stop the giant once and for all, luring him into a 15-foot deep and 9-foot wide pit, dug by Jack himself. Cormoran was trapped, with only his head sticking out. Wasting no time, Jack seized the opportunity, and savagely buried his pickaxe into the giant's skull, killing him. Jack was awarded the giant's wealth and a fine sword, and was given the name Jack the Giant Killer. The name would suit him, as throughout his life, Jack would go on to battle several giants, using his wits, magical items, and no shortage of brutality. His reputation as a giant killer grew and grew, and was eventually granted knighthood at the court of King Arthur. In a later English tale, a different Jack, a lazy ne'er-do-well, encountered a wealthy and hostile giant that lived in a castle atop a magical beanstalk. Jack would visit and steal from the giant's treasure on several occasions, though the giant would express his suspicions in a classic rhyme.
Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread.
But Jack's small size and notable speed overcame the giant's efforts. That is, until he tried to steal a singing harp in the giant's keep. The harp cried out to its owner, and the giant gave chase to Jack, but his cumbersome size made him clumsy on the beanstalk. While the nimble Jack raced home, grabbed an axe, and chopped down the magic beanstalk, sending the giant plummeting to his death. A recurring theme in many of these stories of evil giants is the idea of not only a large and powerful foe, but that of a foreign enemy. In many ways, giants symbolize strangers, outsiders, foreigners, people who lived in far-off lands, who lived differently, and prayed to different gods. Hence why so many giants are said to live in unreachable places such as high mountain peaks, vast deserts, forests, lone islands, within forgotten castles, atop beanstalks, or in extant realms. And this fear of the unknown, and fear of other people and cultures, is why many giants of legend were given some of the most undesirable traits of hideousness, cruelty, barbarism, lust, greed, stupidity, violence, and cannibalism. Depicted engaging in acts of dishonest behavior, stealing goods, pillaging towns, destroying the land, kidnapping children, and eating people. An ultimate evil that could only be vanquished by heroes who embodied a culture's most valued virtues of strength, courage, honesty, chivalry, and cunning. As time would go on and humanity and storytelling would evolve, tales of evil giants lessened some, and soon were coupled with stories of giants being kind, helpful, and even heroic. In fact, many heroes of myth and legend would at times be depicted as giants among humanity, including Hercules, Momotaro, Finn McCool, and the American legend John Henry. In Greek mythology, the original Cyclopses forged Zeus's thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helmet of invisibility, all items that demonstrated the god's divine authority, and brought down countless monsters. Ryubitsal from Czech folklore was said to teach the ways of medicine and give gifts to kind-hearted people, while vindictively toying with the wicked. In the second branch of the Mabinogion, the legendary king of Britain, Bran the Blessed, was said to be a giant, one who was as wise as he was a powerful warrior, with connections to the other world. America has a slew of friendly and heroic giants, including the New York fireman Mose Humphrey, who could effortlessly juggle trolley cars, and the 30-foot sailor, Captain Alfred Bulltop Stormalong, whose exploits include digging the Panama Canal with his ship and battling a kraken with his bare hands. But by far, the most famous American giant, and perhaps most famous friendly giant in folklore, was Paul Bunyan. Hailing from the campfire stories of Northwoods loggers, Paul Bunyan was a giant lumberjack, standing at 63 axe handles high, who cut down trees by the score from the backwoods of Maine all the way to the Pacific Northwest, with a double-bladed axe in hand, and at his side, his equally massive and faithful blue ox, Babe. According to legend, the United States looks the way it does, with mountains, craters, and winding rivers, due to Paul's adventures, clearing North and South Dakota of nearly every tree, digging Lake Michigan as a waterhole for Babe, digging the Missouri River for shipping timber and supplies, creating the Grand Canyon by dragging his axe along the Arizona ground, and creating mountain ranges when roughhousing with Babe. Paul's gargantuan efforts on the frontier opened the American West for trade, work, and colonization. Upon examination of tales of benevolent and friendly giants, especially amidst the cornucopia of myths discussing evil and violent giants, it can be surmised that these stories were created, at least partly, as a means to help combat the scariness of the unknown and the world at large, rather than further demonizing it. Just like the primordial giants of ancient mythology, the good giants shaped the world about them with only the slightest effort on their parts, but did so for the betterment of mankind. There would always be plenty of giant monsters out there to scare people. Perhaps the world needed a few giant heroes. In all of storytelling history, few creatures of legend have made as large of a cultural impact as giants. They appear in the myths and folktales of practically every culture, taking on gargantuan roles of primordial entities, powerful gods, cannibalistic monsters, mighty heroes, the shapers and breakers of the world. As a result, giants have been a staple in fantasy, adventure, and even horror literature, featuring in the works of Jonathan Swift, Oscar Wilde, C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Roald Dahl, and more. They appear in feature films for both adults and for children, acclaimed animation, comic books, painted works, architecture, and even merchandising. The giants of mythology and modern culture, both good and evil, embody the raw power of nature and represent mankind's inner power and their potential to both create and to destroy.